In the grand and often tragic tapestry of Irish history, few figures cast as long a shadow as Daniel O'Connell. He was a man of immense complexity, a colossus who bestrode the early 19th century with a vision that would forever alter the course of his nation. Known to his people as the Liberator, he was a lawyer, a politician, and a masterful orator whose voice could stir the hearts of millions. He promised them a new dawn, a future where their faith would no longer be a barrier to their freedom. His story is not just one of political triumph. It is a deeply human drama filled with passion, principle, and profound paradox. He was a man who preached peace, yet carried the burden of having taken a life. His journey began in the rugged, windswept landscapes of County Kerry, a place far from the centres of power in Dublin and London. Yet it was from this Gaelic heartland that a new form of political resistance would emerge. O'Connell's genius was to understand that true power did not lie in the barrel of a gun, but in the organized will of the people. He harnessed the collective strength of Ireland's Catholic majority, a population long silenced by oppressive laws, and turned them into an unstoppable political force. He gave them a voice when they had none, and taught them that their unity was their greatest weapon in the fight for civil rights and religious freedom. This essay will explore the remarkable life of Daniel O'Connell, a figure who remains both celebrated and debated to this day. We will journey back to his formative years, shaped by the radical ideas of the French Revolution, and examine the core beliefs that drove him. We will witness his rise as the champion of Catholic emancipation, a campaign that fundamentally reshaped the relationship between Ireland and the British state. This was a battle fought not with swords but with words, petitions, and massive peaceful gatherings that demonstrated the unshakable resolve of a nation demanding its rightful place in the world. It was a new kind of revolution, one that would inspire future generations of activists around the globe. But to truly understand O'Connell, we must also confront his contradictions. He was the founder of a powerful strain of Irish nationalism, yet he remained a staunch supporter of the British monarchy. He was a devoted advocate for non-violence, yet the ghost of a fatal duel haunted him for his entire life. These complexities do not diminish his stature, rather they reveal a man grappling with the turbulent currents of his time, striving to navigate a path to freedom without plunging his country into the abyss of a bloody conflict. His legacy is etched into the very fabric of modern Ireland, a testament to the enduring power of peaceful agitation and the complicated nature of a true liberator. Daniel O'Connell was born in 1775, into a world where his Catholic faith marked him as a second-class citizen in his own land. He grew up in the wild beauty of County Kerry, fostered by a local family in the Gaelic tradition before returning to his prosperous uncle, Hunting Cap O'Connell. This upbringing gave him a deep connection to the Irish language and the ordinary people of the countryside. He saw firsthand the injustices of the penal laws, a set of statutes designed to suppress the Catholic population, barring them from owning land, holding public office, or even educating their children in their faith. These early experiences planted the seeds of a lifelong quest for justice, a burning desire to lift his people from their subjugation. His education took him away from Ireland, to Catholic colleges in France, a journey that would change his life forever. It was there, as a young and impressionable student, that he witnessed the seismic events of the French Revolution. He saw the idealism, the calls for liberty, equality, and fraternity, but he also saw the terrifying violence of the terror, the chaos and bloodshed unleashed in the name of revolution. This experience horrified him. It instilled in him a profound and lasting aversion to political violence. He concluded that no political goal, however noble, was worth the price of a single drop of human blood shed in civil conflict. This conviction would become the central pillar of his political philosophy. Returning to Ireland, O'Connell chose the law as his weapon. He trained as a barrister in London and was called to the Irish bar in 1798. The same year, a violent rebellion, inspired by French revolutionary ideals, was brutally crushed across Ireland. He saw the failed uprising as a tragic confirmation of his deepest fears. While he shared the rebels' desire for an independent and equal Ireland, he vehemently rejected their methods. He believed that violence only ever led to more suffering, especially for the common people, and that it gave the authorities the perfect excuse for even harsher repression. His path would be different. He would fight with his mind, his wit, and the power of the law itself. This unique worldview, forged in the crucible of revolution and rebellion, set him apart from many Irish nationalists of his time and those who would follow. He was not a romantic revolutionary dreaming of glorious battle. He was a pragmatist, a constitutionalist who believed that the British system, for all its flaws, could be reformed from within. He sought to use the master's tools, the law, the press, and public opinion, to dismantle the master's house of religious discrimination. This careful, strategic approach, born from the terror he witnessed in France, would define his entire political career and lay the groundwork for a new, non-violent form of Irish nationalism. To his adoring followers, Daniel O'Connell was a larger-than-life hero, a savior sent to deliver them from bondage. But behind the public image was a complex and deeply human individual, driven by a powerful set of personal beliefs and haunted by his own inner conflicts. At his core, O'Connell was a devout Catholic. His faith was not just a private matter, it was the bedrock of his identity and his political mission. He saw the struggle for Catholic rights as a moral crusade, a fight for the soul of the nation. He was also a man of immense charm and charisma, a brilliant orator whose speeches, often delivered in the open air to vast crowds, could be witty, passionate, and fiercely intelligent, holding his audience spellbound for hours. His personal life was marked by a deep and enduring love for his wife Mary, with whom he exchanged countless affectionate letters throughout their life together. He was a devoted father, though his public duties often kept him away from his family for long periods. Despite his considerable income as one of Ireland's most successful barristers, he was famously reckless with money, constantly living on the edge of bankruptcy and relying on a national rent, small donations from his supporters, to fund his political activities. This financial precarity made him utterly dependent on the very people he sought to lead, creating a unique and powerful bond between the leader and his followers. At the heart of O'Connell's character was his unwavering commitment to nonviolence, a principle he championed long before it was popularized by figures like Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. He repeatedly declared that the liberty of Ireland was not worth the shedding of a single drop of blood. This was not merely a political tactic, it was a deeply held moral conviction, born from his traumatic experiences in revolutionary France. He believed that physical force was the weapon of the oppressor, and that moral force, the organized will of a united people, was the only path to true and lasting freedom. He pioneered the use of mass meetings, petitions, and popular agitation as tools for political change. Yet this principled pacifist was also a man of his time, a proud and often pugnacious character who would not suffer an insult lightly. In an era when gentlemen were expected to defend their honor, O'Connell's sharp tongue and fierce debating style made him many enemies. He was quick to anger and could be ruthless in his verbal attacks on political opponents. This aggressive streak, this sensitivity to personal honor, stood in stark contrast to his public philosophy of peace. It was a contradiction that would eventually lead him to a dark and tragic moment that would cast a long shadow over the rest of his life and complicate his legacy as a man of peace. The year was 1815. The Napoleonic Wars had ended, but political tensions in Dublin were running high. Daniel O'Connell was already a prominent figure known for his fierce advocacy for Catholic rights and his scathing attacks on the Protestant establishment that governed the city. One of his targets was the Dublin Corporation, which he publicly denounced as a beggarly and corrupt institution. His inflammatory language provoked a furious response from its members, and one man in particular, a former soldier named John de Stair, felt his honor had been personally slighted. In the rigid, honor-bound culture of the time, such an insult demanded satisfaction on the field of honor. De Stair, a skilled marksman, issued a challenge for a duel. O'Connell, a man who had built his emerging political philosophy on the rejection of violence, found himself trapped by the conventions of his class. To refuse the duel would have been seen as an act of cowardice, a stain that would have destroyed his reputation and undermined his ability to lead. He believed he had no choice but to accept. On the cold afternoon of 1st February 1815, the two men met at Bishop's Court, a field in County Kildare. They stood apart, pistols in hand, ready to settle their dispute with a deadly exchange. It was a moment that stood in direct opposition to everything O'Connell claimed to believe in. As the signal was given, both men fired. De Stair missed his mark, O'Connell did not. His shot struck De Stair in the hip, inflicting a mortal wound. The man died 2 days later. O'Connell was overcome with a profound and lasting remorse. He had taken a human life, an act that violated his deepest moral convictions. The victory on the dueling field felt like a devastating spiritual defeat. He was plagued by guilt for the rest of his days, offering financial support to D'Estaires's widow for many years, and reportedly wearing a black glove on his right hand when receiving communion as a public sign of his penance. The duel became a defining paradox of O'Connell's life. How could the great advocate for peaceful agitation, the man who preached against bloodshed, be a killer? His enemies used it to portray him as a hypocrite, a violent demagogue hiding behind a mask of pacifism. For O'Connell himself, the event was a searing, personal tragedy that seemed to harden his resolve. He vowed never again to be drawn into a duel, and his commitment to non-violent methods in his political campaigns became even more fervent, as if he were trying to atone for that single fatal act of violence. The stain of D'Estaires's death never truly washed away, serving as a constant, grim reminder of the conflict between his principles and the brutal realities of his world. In 1823, Daniel O'Connell embarked on the most ambitious and defining campaign of his career, the fight for Catholic emancipation. The goal was simple, but, honestly, revolutionary: to repeal the last of the penal laws that barred Catholics from sitting in the British Parliament at Westminster. For decades, this had really just been a distant dream, pursued by small groups of wealthy Catholic gentlemen with little success. O'Connell's genius was to transform this elite lobbying effort into a massive, nationwide popular movement. He founded the Catholic Association, an organization that would become the engine of his campaign and, a model for political mobilization across the world. The key to the association's success was something called the Catholic Rent. O'Connell devised a brilliant scheme where ordinary people could become members for a subscription of just 1 penny a month. This was affordable for even the poorest tenant farmer, and it had a truly transformative effect. It gave hundreds of thousands of people a direct stake in the political struggle. It was their movement funded by their pennies. The local parish priest often acted as the collection agent, turning the vast network of the Catholic Church into an incredibly effective political machine. The rent not only funded the campaign's activities but also demonstrated the immense organized power of the Catholic majority. O'Connell orchestrated a series of what became known as monster meetings, enormous peaceful gatherings that brought together tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people. These were not riots or protests, they were highly disciplined displays of public opinion. People would march for miles to hear the Liberator speak. He would address them from a platform, his powerful voice carrying across the fields, assuring them that their cause was just and that their victory was inevitable if they remained united and peaceful. These meetings were a spectacle of power, sending a clear and honestly intimidating message to the government in London. The people of Ireland were organized, determined, and could no longer be ignored. The campaign was a masterclass in political strategy. O'Connell used the press to spread his message, established local branches of the association in every parish, and used the Catholic clergy as his lieutenants. He was creating a state within a state, a parallel power structure that challenged the authority of the British administration in Ireland. He was teaching a politically inexperienced population how to engage in constitutional politics. He showed them that their strength was not in secret societies or armed rebellion, but in open, democratic, and peaceful agitation. The campaign for Catholic emancipation was not just about changing a law, it was about changing a mindset, awakening a nation to its own collective power. The climax of the campaign for Catholic emancipation arrived in 1828 with a moment of audacious political theater. A by-election was called in County Clare, and Daniel O'Connell, despite being a Catholic and legally barred from taking a seat in Parliament, decided to stand as a candidate. It was a direct challenge to the entire political system. His opponent was a popular liberal Protestant, but O'Connell's campaign really galvanized the Catholic electorate. The 40-shilling freeholders, small tenant farmers who had the right to vote, were mobilized by their priests and the Catholic Association. They were urged to defy their Protestant landlords who traditionally dictated their vote and to cast their ballot for their Liberator. The result was, honestly, a political earthquake. The tenant farmers, in a remarkable act of collective courage, voted overwhelmingly for O'Connell. He won a landslide victory, creating an unprecedented constitutional crisis. The British government was faced with an impossible situation. They had a democratically elected member of parliament who was legally forbidden from taking his seat because of his religion. O'Connell had brilliantly exposed the absurdity and injustice of the law. To refuse him his seat would risk sparking the very mass rebellion in Ireland that O'Connell himself had worked so hard to prevent. The government, led by the Duke of Wellington and Sir Robert Peel, realized they were trapped. Wellington, the arch-Tory and victor of Waterloo, was no friend to the Catholic cause. He famously admitted that he was granting emancipation not because he believed it was right, but to avoid the greater evil of civil war. He saw the disciplined, peaceful power that O'Connell had unleashed in Ireland and knew that the government had no choice but to concede. In 1829, after intense debate and political maneuvering, the British Parliament passed the Roman Catholic Relief Act. This historic legislation finally removed the barriers preventing Catholics from sitting in Parliament and holding most senior public offices. It was a monumental victory, one without a single shot being fired in anger. For the people of Ireland, it was a moment of incredible triumph and vindication. Daniel O'Connell was hailed as the Liberator, the man who had broken the chains of religious oppression. He had proven that the organized, non-violent will of the people could force even the most powerful empire in the world to bend. However, the victory was not without its costs. To appease the hardliners, the government simultaneously passed a law that raised the property qualification for voting, disenfranchising the very 40-shilling freeholders who had bravely elected O'Connell and Clare. It was a bitter pill to swallow, a sign that the struggle for full equality was far from over. One of the most enduring puzzles of Daniel O'Connell's career is his steadfast loyalty to the British Crown. In the same breath that he championed the rights and identity of the Irish nation, he would profess his unwavering allegiance to the King or Queen in London. This seems like a glaring contradiction to modern eyes. How could the father of Irish nationalism, a man who fought so fiercely against British-imposed laws, also be a monarchist? To understand this, we really have to see the world through his 19th century eyes. For O'Connell, the problem was not the monarchy itself, but the unjust and biased way in which Ireland was governed in the monarch's name. He believed in a constitutional monarchy, a system where the crown was a symbol of unity and stability for a multinational kingdom, including Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales. His vision was not for a complete separation from Britain, but for a reformed relationship. He wanted Ireland to have its own parliament in Dublin, managing its own domestic affairs, but remaining linked to Britain through a shared monarch. This was the policy of repeal of the Union, his next great campaign after emancipation. He saw no conflict between being a loyal subject of the Queen and being a proud Irish patriot demanding self-government. For him, the two identities were perfectly compatible. This position was also a matter of shrewd political strategy. By constantly professing his loyalty to the crown, O'Connell positioned himself as a reformer, not a revolutionary separatist. This made his demands seem more reasonable and less threatening to the British establishment. It allowed him to operate within the system, using its own language and symbols to argue for change. It also provided a shield against accusations of treason, a charge that had sent many Irish patriots before him to the gallows. His monarchism was a way of reassuring the authorities that his mass movements were not a prelude to a bloody French-style Republican revolution, but a constitutional demand for justice. Ultimately, this dual allegiance highlights the unique nature of O'Connell's nationalism. It was not the romantic, Gaelic, and often separatist nationalism that would emerge later in the 19th century. His was a civic and political nationalism, focused on achieving civil rights and parliamentary self-government within the existing framework of the United Kingdom. He wanted to transform the Union into a genuine partnership of equals, rather than tear it down completely. This complex and often misunderstood position made him a towering figure of his time, but it also put him at odds with a younger generation of nationalists who began to dream of a fully independent Irish republic. Daniel O'Connell's influence on the course of Irish history is, honestly, immeasurable. He was, in many ways, the principal architect of modern Irish political life. Before him, Irish politics was the exclusive domain of a small Protestant elite and a handful of wealthy Catholic aristocrats. O'Connell fundamentally democratized it. By creating the Catholic Association and the Catholic Rent, he drew the great mass of the Irish people directly into the political process for the first time. He taught them the power of collective action and gave them a sense of national consciousness and political efficacy that they had never possessed before. This laid the foundation for all subsequent Irish nationalist movements. His pioneering of non-violent mass agitation as a political tool had a global impact. He demonstrated that a disenfranchised population could challenge a powerful state and win significant concessions without resorting to violence. His methods of organizing huge, peaceful meetings, using a popular subscription to fund a movement, and leveraging the press were studied and admired by activists around the world. Abolitionists fighting slavery in the United States, like Frederick Douglass, praised O'Connell for his consistent and vocal opposition to slavery. Later, Mahatma Gandhi would look to O'Connell's campaigns as an early example of the kind of mass civil disobedience he would employ in India. In Ireland, his legacy is visible everywhere. The main thoroughfare in the capital city is O'Connell Street, adorned with a grand monument in his honor. He effectively secured the place of the Catholic Church at the center of Irish public life, a position it would hold for more than a century and a half. By linking the clergy to his political machine, he forged a powerful alliance between faith and national identity that would define modern Ireland. While the nature of that relationship has changed dramatically in recent times, its origins can be traced directly back to O'Connell's campaigns. He made Catholicism and Irishness politically synonymous for generations. However, his legacy is also complex and debated. His constitutional, non-violent approach was later rejected by more radical nationalists who argued that his methods were too slow and that true freedom could only be won through physical force. They criticized his loyalty to the monarchy and his ultimate failure to achieve his great post-emancipation goal, the repeal of the Act of Union. The catastrophic Great Famine, which began near the end of his life, seemed to many to be a tragic indictment of his constitutional methods, suggesting they were inadequate to protect the Irish people from the ultimate disaster. He was a political giant, but even he could not solve the profound and deep-rooted problems facing his country. To look back on the life of Daniel O'Connell from the vantage point of the 21st century is to see a figure who is both a product of his time and, honestly, remarkably ahead of it. He was a man of deep and troubling contradictions, the pacifist who killed a man, the nationalist who loved the Queen, the liberator whose great victory came at the cost of disenfranchising his most loyal supporters. These paradoxes do not diminish his importance. Instead, they make him a more compelling and relevant historical figure, a man who wrestled with the messy, imperfect reality of enacting meaningful political change in a world resistant to it. He was not a saint in plaster, but a flawed, brilliant, and powerful human being. His central achievement, Catholic emancipation, was a watershed moment. It was the first successful mass democratic movement in European history, and it fundamentally altered the political landscape of the United Kingdom. O'Connell proved that moral force, organized and disciplined, could be more powerful than military might. He gave a voice to the voiceless, and demonstrated a new path to power for oppressed peoples everywhere. His story is a powerful reminder that the fight for civil rights is a long and arduous process, and that its victories are often won not on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of the people, one penny and one vote at a time. The questions O'Connell faced continue to resonate today. What is the most effective way to challenge injustice? Is it through violent revolution or peaceful constitutional reform? How does a nation define itself? And what is the relationship between national identity, religious faith, and political loyalty? O'Connell's career offers a powerful case study in the possibilities and limitations of nonviolent political action. His unwavering belief in the power of democratic organization and peaceful protest remains a vital and inspiring lesson in an age still grappling with conflict, division, and the struggle for human rights across the globe. Ultimately, Daniel O'Connell's story endures because it is the story of the birth of a modern political consciousness. He took a population cowed by centuries of oppression and taught them to stand up, to speak out, and to demand their rights as citizens. He may not have achieved all of his goals, and his methods may have been superseded by later generations, but he set Ireland on a new path. He was the Liberator, a title he earned not by conquering armies, but by awakening a nation to its own strength. He remains a titan of Irish history, a complex and fascinating figure whose legacy is woven into the very DNA of modern Ireland.